It's not your deal. It's not my deal. I, I don't know. Not right. I'm
Not
from Charleston.
something.
Or they come back before the sport, he
The January 24th to 24th, 2024 BAR large meeting in the Crawcheck Public Meeting Room at 2 George Street. I'm John Robinson, the chairman for this evening's proceedings. The other board members present are Jay White, Luda Stonechick, James Metters. Stephen Brown is absent. City staff present are Corey Parrish, the city architect, B.D. Wortham Galvin, the incoming city architect, Lawrence Courtney, staff architect, and Travis Galley, preservation planner. The applicants have been required to submit any and all documents for presentation this evening in advance of the meeting. Staff will control the presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the applicable deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask the staff to advance to the slide that they would like the board and the public to see. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name when speaking. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the City of Charleston Public Meeting Channel on YouTube. Your presence here is your consent to be recorded. The order of each agenda item presentation will be as follows, or each application presentation will be as follows. There's first an introduction and overview of the project by the city staff for the benefit of the board and public. This is followed by the applicant's presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit unless extended by the chair. Persons affiliated with the project, be they the owner, developer, architect, or consultant, should speak during this portion of the meeting rather than the later public comment period. The applicant's presentation is followed by public comment. All applications are part of a public meeting format. Written public comments were due by noon yesterday. Those comments have been disseminated, if any, to the board. Those present with us this evening, if any, have a 2-minute time limit on their application. Any person wishing to speak should state their name and address for the record. The public comment portion of the meeting is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant then has up to 5 minutes, which they do not have to exercise, to respond or clarify either to public comments and or city staff comments and recommendations. This is ultimately followed by board discussion and vote on any agenda item. The applicant's presentation is concluded. At this point, public comment is closed. The applicant should clarify any inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising a hand and being called upon. Board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and their vote on any given motion. The chair shall reread a motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct me if I have not correctly restated it. Once a motion is in proper order and seconded, each member when voting should say yay in favor or nay not in favor. This is a reminder to any member of the public that comments that are not germane to the purview of this board should not be considered. Any person wishing to speak should approach the podium, center of the room. For housekeeping, there are no agenda items have been withdrawn or deferred. There are no recusals, and there is no public comment, at least in written form at this point. And so at this point, we will move to agenda item A1. Approval of minutes from November 16th.
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Secondly, agenda item A2, approval of the minutes from the December 13, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Metters moves to approve. Is there a second? Okay, it's in proper order. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That moves us to
Yeah.
Oh, you were.
we've already approved all of that.
I'm sorry, I was on auto. I thought you were speaking of the January. I thought you were speaking of the January 10th.
I thought you did too. I went with it.
So agenda item A1, approval of meetings from January 10, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes. And I'm glad we were so proud of our results on the previous one.
Well, November 16th and December 13th are definitely.
They're set in stone. All right, we'll move on to applicant's presentation. Item B1, 214, 216 Spring Street.
Right, this one is for new construction, West Side Neighborhood, the High District 6 and 3, and we're in the Old City District. The applicant is requesting final approval for construction, multifamily building with 134 micro dwelling units and 43 parking spaces. For context purposes, this is going to be on the north side of Spring Street, and we've got the outline there showing you the property. And then this is the property today. That was on Ashton Street, which is the rear of the property.
Very good. We'll now have the applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff Roberts, representing the development team. We appreciate the privilege of being able to present this unique project, which will hopefully bring much needed price approachable housing within walkable distance to jobs, supermarkets, and public transportation right across the street from the medical university. We're very proud of the particular project and very proud of the work that Bill Hornoff and Caitlin Woodward, the project architects, have done on it. So in the interest of brevity, let me get on with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Jeff, just for interest, the price appropriate, what is the range of rents gonna be in there?
Well, if you were to take a studio apartment in a similar district, a studio apartment would probably be current market level. I'd say 2,200 a month, 2,300 a month. So this would be a fairly significant order of magnitude less, perhaps 30% less or something of that nature. But what it does is it gives people in a economic cohort the ability to live alone and walk to work and not have to be driving out to Knightsville an hour and a half each way and then finding a place to park in an MUSC parking lot and taking the bus. So again, they don't need those large spaces, but it's got very ample ceiling height. All these units are self-sufficient and the building is a Class A building, and someone who would qualify as a developer who does a lot of affordable housing for the city on a private development point of view. I can tell you that the AMI for a singleton in the city is about 62,000 a year. So somebody making that or even less than that can go through the front of the rental office door without a subsidy.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Hornoff.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you. Okay, so what I'd like to do is focus on the the comments that were left from preliminary. So if we could go to the next slide, slide 2, please. Very ugly slide, just a bunch of text. So this sort of outlines the comments from both staff and BAR. And if we could go to, let's start at slide 22, start with the images. So this building is a one-story podium. Parking is fully enclosed within that one-story podium with 5-story residential volumes. There are 5 volumes that sit on top of this podium. You know, conceptually, that's the building. The podium itself is derived by this brick wall that wraps all the way around the building. There's a sort of a reveal between that podium and the second level. If we go back to 22. Go back one.
Don't have slide numbers on these.
If you look on,
Is that
If you prefer the sheet number?
Yeah.
Yeah, one more. If you go back, sorry. One more. One more. There we go. That's correct. So this is a view of Spring Street. So as I was saying, the base carries up to 13 feet. There's a gap between the top of the base and the underside of those residential volumes, and those residential volumes are clad in one pigmented zinc and or anodized aluminum. And so you see here the variation from conceptual to preliminary to final. Next slide. I'll go into the sort of details from the comments here shortly. Looking at the Spring Street address. Residential entrance is to the west of the building. Next slide. So this is the west side of the building. You can see the variation. The lower left-hand image is the conceptual image. The one just to the right of that is the preliminary image, and then the one above is the current image. The idea was to kind of simplify this base, right? Sometimes it's best just to sort of simplify the design, and you can start seeing conceptual. We had a lot going on. The comments, as you may recall, was that it was heavy and there was a lot of mass. So in preliminary, we did a sort of rippled wall that broke up that big zinc mass. The the variation, what we did here is that we held that line all the way across the base, that 13-foot line with the grill kind of separating, again, that second floor from the base, and then simplified the materials. If you recall from preliminary, this ripple wall had a varying pattern, same zinc material, but the pattern we rotated. And the thinking was that's a little more than we needed. And so what we are doing is wherever we have the pigmented zinc, the pattern is the same. It's the 16 by 36 interlocking zinc panels. So the green is zinc that you see in these images. The other, and I'll get this in the materials, but we did make a change to the black. We had standing seam aluminum panel, which is running vertically. And so we've rotated that. So now that runs horizontally for a couple of reasons. One, we just did this on another project and it looked very nice. And two, we could manage the seams better. And it also had more of a clapboard sort of feel to it rather than sort of this vertical board and bat, if you will.
It's more of a flat seam now that it's running.
Yeah.
I mean, horizontal.
Yeah. So the key here was really holding that line. You can kind of, and we also had sort of intermittent, as you would call, one of our strategies is to use a vine attached to the wall to soften that, especially when we get into the back of the building. And the preliminary, we had, you know, this sort of alternating brick and vine, and here we're just keeping it more simpler. We also eliminated the ripple brick at just underneath the rippled zinc. A lot of rippling going on. And so now it's just this, our perforated detail. This, you can sort of see there's the PVC piece is what we're using at the entry. So it's a little bit lighter. Next slide, please. So the entry, it's just a minor change. We have this material, it's a geolam material, it's an aluminum with substrate with a veneer cladding, that's the wood you see. So we've added these sort of wood accents into the scheme to kind of soften, and it's metal and brick. And so the idea of the wood is sort of a softener, if you will. Next slide. And here you see we have this sort of rippled brick detail. So the front of the building has the rippled brick. It flattens out at, say, a door or lining up with the balconies above. And that's what you see, the vertical striations as you go down the east elevation towards the back of the building. And that really hasn't changed. We have changed the material in the back of the building, the substrate for this. Now we have masonry wall. It's a CMU wall with a Portland cement stucco finish, and the ivy and her vine is attached to that. And the vine is attached to a grid. So it would be something like Confederate jasmine or something. And, you know, that's going to have a little white flower to it. But the idea is that that's a little bit more hardy. That will, once it's established, will hang in there a little bit longer. Next slide. And then, you know, I think the best thing about this view is you can sort of see that how that base interacts with the residences that brought up to it. And so that's really principally what the ivy is about, is to kind of create this sort of soft wall. And then that same detail expands up and becomes railing for those units on the backside of the building. Next slide. And then let's cover, I'll go through this really fast. So one of the questions was about the box bay. Initially, and you can sort of see on the far left, our prelim design option for the box bay, and that was one long bay. Proportionally, it seemed a little too vertical in our opinion, and that the box bays, and so what then happened, you could sort of see the window itself is fairly narrow. In prelim, and this is really feedback we got from preservation and historic, is that they were concerned about the amount of wall that was on that side, and so that window then grew, and then the box bays were broken up. And I think in kind of reflecting on it, the idea is that these box bays, if you remember back to some of the images I showed you earlier, you know, sort of replicate the vertical rhythm that we see in the building, both in the balconies on the east side, but also at the sort of further west side of the Spring Street image. So, you know, in other ways, it's sort of tying the building together here. Next slide. So that's why our bay design is what we're looking at here. The other comment was the shields. It was a railing that was clad in metal to replicate some these sort of lower panels for the windows just to the east. And so we've reconsidered that. We now added wood. So the wood is, as you can sort of see in that tall sectioned image, that the wood sort of carries up and, you know, again, is this accent piece, but also reflects that same repetition, but that the railing is open, you know, so in other words, we let more light into that unit beyond. So they're friendlier shields now. Next slide, please. And then, you know, this again covers sort of what I was just talking about with the west wall, that you can sort of see the base detail, how we have this sort of this louvered wall that carries up and opens up the entry more. It allows better access than having that brick wall. It lines up, so the entry canopy is an extension of that line of the masonry wall. And then you can sort of see how the ivy picks up just to the north of the stairwell. Next slide. And then the other comment was about the railings. Initially in our design, we had the railings butting into the face of those boxes. And so now those railings carry in and sort of are tied inside the reveal. If that makes sense. So the railings are connected on the inside versus hitting the face of the pavilions. Slide. And then the material. So we still have, you can sort of see the M1 materials, the black brick out of US brick. The M2 we're calling is the Portland cement stucco that's black. And for us, it kind of adds that mass to the base again, but then gets softened with the vine. The MT1 is the pigmented zinc. We have a small piece here, but that reflects the color. The MTL2 is shown there vertically, but as I said, it's going to run horizontally. It's a consistent 16-inch wide pattern. And then we have two metal accents. These are metal accents that are, you can sort of see how they're used in the windows. So they're just, you know, they add a little more lightness to the color, but also our preformed metal, the floor slab edges will match the MTL1 material, the standing seam siding. The louver material, as you see there, this is from a company out of New York. Our aluminum window system, which we forgot to bring a sample. And the wood one is the geolam. That's this material. It's really aluminum, but it's clad with a wood veneer. So it's real wood, but it just, you know, it doesn't perform like real.
Meaning it performs better than.
Yes, meaning it won't go gray, it won't warp. You know, it's really, it has all the natural inherentness of metal, and it's a thick gauge metal, but with the veneer of wood. So it has that, you can see it has a grain to it. You can actually feel it. The Japanese material that's made here in the US. So then I just have some details. I don't know, do we want to go through details?
Floor is yours.
So let's do that fast. So if I gave you the sheet number, is that easier?
Yes.
8821. So this is the box bay detail. So again, you can kind of see a detail of how the box bay will work. The box bay is our metal panels. It's thick. It's a 3-inch thickness. So proportionally that is, so that it fits in with the building, but it extends. It's really like a big, deep window frame. But it also has the metal angles that come down and support it from floor to ceiling. Next slide. The entry canopy wood, you can sort of see how we actually have a column going up through that. That's the entryway would be the residential lobby. And the detail of how the wood veneer or clapboard carries into the residential lobby.
And What we see there is the WD one also.
Yeah, that's right. There's really one wood on the outside of the look. Next slide. Our accordion brick detail. This will have a custom coping to it. You can see the coping here is gonna move in and out with the brick. This happens in isolated areas, mostly on the east side, but you can sort of see how that condition fluctuates with brick and with the vine, and then above where the louver meets the top of that wall. Next slide. So one of the other comments was about this detailing of how the siding came together. I think this image this is our intent, right? This is the idea of what we're trying to do. Obviously, we want to carry that zinc in and make this pavilion look, as a sort of a volume or a mass. And you can kind of see how the idea would carry back. This is at the second floor soffit, how it would carry back to the louver wall. So this is the MTL1 material. This is the interlocking pigmented zinc detail. Next slide. Next slide will be the MTL2. So this is our board and back. Ignore the vertical illustrations. This, as I said, will run horizontal. Same details though, same corner trim profiles. And these are all very standard trim profiles by the same manufacturer that we would use at door jambs, corners, window jambs, corners, coping, etc. Next slide. And our window details. I think the most interesting thing about these is just the position of the window. Again, the idea is to accentuate the mass of these volumes, and so the windows are set back fairly deep, 5-ish inches.
So in this set of drawings, I'll look through it. Do you feel like most of your flashing details are worked out? So what we see here that is pretty much what it's going to be.
I think so. There's always this ongoing, and we're doing this now with the subcontractor and the GC, working out details. So I think, look, we intend to be very involved in the CA work here. And so I think that this is just an ongoing conversation with them. Let me ask the question. Are they well worked out?
I mean, I didn't think that. I thought they were.
And if you say no, then yes, we have work to do.
There were a few odds and ends that I just wasn't sure exactly how it was going to finish out, whether or not it would end up showing a counter flash. I'll just use that, a counter flashing, because I couldn't quite see it work out, but I was just wondering.
Look, there are a couple of conditions that are kind of tricky that, for us, what's really important is working with the subcontractor on how that gets executed. That's a conversation that we always have. We'll draw these details over and over and over, and they always end up getting a little bit revised in the field. Let's go to A908. 2 more and then I'm done. So this is our louver detail. This is you can sort of see the louver, the sample of the louver. This is a railing. This is a grill, a louvered wall. And sometimes it's backed up with a metal panel. So sometimes it's solid, meaning on the west side it'll be solid, but you still have that pattern of the louver. So this is how our detail will work. Next slide. And then this is the wood wall. This is our wood railing, I guess we call it. So that's that same material. This material has trim pieces. So the intention is that we're using, it's all within that same manufacturer, but there's a frame around this wall, and then the clapboard is inset on both sides. So it's, fully a wood wall that is connected to the floor deck frame. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Warren, any questions from the board or staff at this time? Seeing none? Any member of the public wishing to speak on this agenda? Yes, but if you would, you may have came in just after we announced it. If members of the public who wish to speak would approach the podium and identify themselves and their address.
Are you us?
No, I think we hear you just fine.
My name is Caroline Frady. I live on 23 Ashton Street. My home is directly adjacent to this proposed development and will render my living space untenable due to severe noise nuisance. I work from home for a small local nonprofit and also run a freelance wedding photography business. Both of these jobs require me to spend the majority of my time at home as I do not have access to office spaces. I simply cannot imagine how I will accomplish anything during the process of this major construction project a few yards from my front door. I'm also extremely concerned about the impact of this development on the already scarce street parking. The city does not have a functioning public transportation system that is comparable to this lifestyle. Is it extremely unrealistic to assume that most of the people living here will not have cars, even if they can walk to work or a grocery store? The reality is that the majority of people still need a car to get pretty much anywhere else in Charleston. Walking is a nice benefit, but it is currently not the norm. The Post and Courier issued a story in March of 2022 about this development and the proposed change of zoning for micro units. To quote, while reducing parking requirements might increase the amount of housing available on the peninsula, skeptics of these policies say they can lead to more street parking in surrounding areas. The risk comes in when we are dealing with theory. Department of City Planning and Real Estate Development at Clemson University says, in theory, if you provide less parking, people will have less cars, but the data says the jury is still out. To manage that concern, Roberts said that this proposal includes a provision that prohibits tenants of such buildings from applying for city parking passes. Even if this is a policy, this will do little to stop illegal parking on the street, as these passes are poorly enforced and rarely ticketed. Planning Director Robert Summerfield voiced some concern over the impact of reducing parking requirements more broadly. I'm not sure about the size of the units and the nature of our transit systems to support this right now. The article also references the Low Country Rapid Transit coming online in the future, but that project is not supposed to be operating until at least 2029. We cannot even guarantee that the peninsula, especially the west side, built on marsh and piled with artificial fill, will be livable at all in 2029, continuing to cut down trees, remove vegetation, and create more impervious surfaces exacerbates an already out of control issue. My backyard is already underwater during a small flooding event. All of the extra water currently absorbed by the root systems and plants in this lot will be flowing directly into my property. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other member of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda?
Good evening, y'all. My name's Alec Cook. I'm in 29 Ashton Street. I'm a C-17 pilot stationed here at the base. And for me, I am the property that's pretty much between the pool and the park amenity and the backside of the building. I have two primary concerns. One being the proximity of the development to specifically 29 and 31 Ashton and 33 Ashton. Just from in my backyard, I have a tree that's within 1.5 feet of my fence line, which is the lot. That tree stretches to 2 to 3 stories. And so my biggest concern there is the proximity of the building to kind of 2 ponds here. One, the construction. So with that construction taking place, the damage or potential damage being caused to that tree and basically potentially killing that tree. For me, the biggest thing there is one, additional damage to the houses of 29 Ashton Street and 31 Ashton Street specifically. In addition to that, once the building is built, if that tree were to, die or whatnot, who the cost is going to go to as far as removing the extremities of that tree, which in a situation where this, goes south, I mean, that would fall on me because it's in my yard. This tree is, it's a substantial tree, just as big as the one that I believe is depicted in the pictures as well, that they are building around. That tree, in addition, which is behind 33 Ashton, actually slopes into the development. So I'm not really quite sure how that's going to be handled with the specs, with just seeing how the proximity to my tree, which is in my yard. So that's a big concern for me. The second is the lifestyle that my neighbor alluded to, and the noise and the construction. I can tell you when they were building the kind of the spec wall, they built it in what was previously the previous owner's backyard, which is now the developer owns it. The construction there caused 2 problems. One, with the lifestyle change for being a pilot, I have to have 12 hours crew rest. So the construction, that kind of interferes with that. And that's talking about in my lifestyle based canceling flights if I don't have the men crew rest to fly an aircraft. I understand developing and whatnot, like that's a necessity. So I completely understand that. The addition though of building in that area specifically though for my house is that I've already had landscaping issues because the previous owner's yard extended there. So my landscaping and electrical issues, I think I've resolved a lot of that. The plumbing, I have no idea how much my plumbing extends. I'm not the expert in that, but I do know I've already had to make quick fixes in the landscaping aspect. So just more additional costs. But for the most part, those are the two concerns for me. It's just the proximity to my yard and my house with potential damage and also, what do you call it? Terrain behind my house as far as what is underneath the land. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public?
My name is Lauren Zanovka, and I'm a nurse living at 31 Ashton Street. Almost 3 years ago, I came to visit friends in Charleston, fell in love with the area, and I knew I wanted to move here. In order to do that, I needed to live close to the hospitals, given our 12.5-hour shifts. And the only way to swing downtown was to buy a place that provided me not only a home, but also supplemental Airbnb income. So I've gone through the city's process to get my property approved for Airbnb. And I'm also currently transitioning to a work from home situation. This new build is going to encroach right up to my back fence. And I'm worried that this is severely going to impact my Airbnb income, as well as not being able to work in my own home due to the construction nuisance. I've also been told by, like Howlett mentioned, I've been told by a surveyor that much of the property in this area is on wet landfill, and all of the other massive buildings in the area had to be built on piles. My home is not on piles. So not only is this going to be, the noise disturbance going to be an issue, but I'm concerned about any potential damage a building of this size will do to the surrounding homes and especially my foundation. And the parking situation. 45 spaces for 134 units. This increased street traffic and parking scarcity on Ashton Street will be inevitable. It's slightly unfair that I, as an Airbnb owner, have gone through the city laws to provide a parking space for each room in my rental unit, but this apartment complex only plans to provide one space for every 3 units. And my guests are temporary visitors to the area that don't always bring even a car. I understand the necessity to build denser in the face of a housing crisis, but it's unfair that the residents of Ashton Street will be absorbing a city problem. 31 Ashton is my home, business, and livelihood that I worked extremely hard for and don't want to give up due to the noise levels that will discourage guests from booking, as well as prevent me from working in my own dwelling space. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda item? I'm going to take a second to do a sidebar here because it's always the time that you miss something in this remarks that the issue comes up. So they say it's the bullet that you don't hear that gets you. So let me cover this. Normally in our readout, I know we had some folks walk in right as we were starting. We stress to the public, in addition to other things, that comments related to zoning, parking, traffic, and lot coverage are not the purview of this board. But for the benefit of people who came here to speak tonight, certainly adjacent property owners, I would ask this of Mr. Roberts, because it's not anything that's not public record. I just don't have it in front of me. Has this project been to TRC?
Yes, this project has been to TRC, and it's also been the subject of countless presentations to the neighborhood, planning commissions, zoning, and I probably say this has been before at least 10 public boards and commissions. And unbeknownst to some of the new residents on Ashton Street who spoke tonight, I think we're up to about 17 houses that we constructed on Ashton Street. Many have one paralocal awards. And to assuage some of the comments of these concerned citizens, I think Patrick and I are for 25 years, certainly me 25 years, and some of the most holistically responsible developers that have done more for the West Side neighborhood and small batch infill development in the city. So we are certainly morally responsible for any damages we cause. We're very legally intensive that we realize if we break it, we bought it like pottery barn rules. And we will never operate without, we will always operate within the confines of city ordinance and top level contractors and subs. And I can't help construction noise and anything else, but everything that will be done will be in the within the ordinances promulgated by city council, and we don't abuse anything. So I'm familiar with most residents on Ashton Street because we built their houses. The first young lady, we're familiar with Mrs. Porche, who owns her house, and I've never met the pilot, but we certainly are very supportive of military people and anything we can do to assist. But holistically, we promise that if any development team that would get a hold of the site, we are the people you want building it.
And again, obviously it's not the purview of this board. It's not going into consideration of our deliberations. I like to make sure that members of the public, especially adjacent property owners, feel like they have addressed what they want before the board, even if it's something we can't consider. Have you been, you mentioned it, but you've been approved at BZA for this use? Yeah.
Matter of fact, we even assisted in writing the zoning ordinance and worked it out with Corporation Council and Lee, and it was approved unanimously with much accolade at City Council.
And remind me the name of the gentleman who appeared before us a couple times, who is the head of the neighborhood association.
Audrey Lisbon is the head of the neighborhood association.
Excuse me, female. Yeah.
And Arthur Lawrence.
I'm thinking about Mr. Lawrence.
Is the
Yes.
professor emeritus and.
Yeah, that's who I was thinking about. Thank you. And again, that's not subject to our deliberations. I want members of the public to understand this has been a part of the process and that it's been ongoing. And then, of course, looking at our own notes, thanks to Corey's hard work, we can see that there was a conceptual review sometime before January 25th of 2023. So that's over a year ago. Now, when was the conceptual? Because with preliminary was about a year, right at a year ago.
Yeah, preliminary was a year ago. I thought that might be a good thing.
And again, just for the benefit of the public who are here, when we do a review process on any project of this scale, big or large, there is initially a conceptual review. That conceptual review is height, scale, mass, general architectural direction. We have some idea of how big it is in relationship to the things around it, how it fits in the neighborhood, whether the massing is appropriate. And then the second phase is a preliminary approval, where the architect and developer have to come in and they have to give us a pretty good idea of what the architectural details of the building are going to look like and really form it up. So the fenestration, the pattern of the windows, whether it's vertical or horizontal, how does vegetation fit in? How does it interact with the streetscape? You kind of have to pin that down. And then here tonight at final, which sometimes we defer to staff, but on a project of this scale, the board needs to see it. We're really down to, as I think you've heard in this presentation, and you can come see this panel up here if it interests you, the literal materials, final materials that the applicant intends to use, how they intend to affix them to the building. Like you've heard a little bit about these metal panels and the trickiness of getting them to go together, how these window systems work, because that's very important to us on a project like this. And really have what is effectively a final decision that sometimes gets deferred to the shop drawings to the staff. It's important for me, and I think this board to understand that saying this politely, and that a lot of the things that you are very concerned about either are not the purview of this board. So literally TRC decides where the fire hydrants go and the curb cuts and that kind of thing. Board of Zoning Appeals, BZA, is where you go to determine a use, which, as you heard, is these micro units that are affordable and so have special rules apply to them. Same with what's effectively a parking variance. It has to have less parking. All of those things have been determined by boards other than us. But I would say, since we only have this one agenda item, this board is always thinking about ways for the public to understand those issues, and even if it doesn't change an outcome, feel like they've been informed. Because what we discover all the time is when people come to BAR, a lot of times the horse has left the barn in the sense that what the thing is, how big it is, how you access it, how it's parked, what the intent of the developer is, has kind of been set. And at this point, with all those things having been determined, we're really charged with literally what it looks like, whether it's at the first stage of, is it 5 stories or 3 stories? How much of the lot does it take up? And how does it respond to houses in the neighborhood? One thing you'll see, and I would encourage you to talk to the developer, is there's what I call a step down in the back of this property, which you as the owners may not feel is satisfactory, but the idea is to get, as that building comes out and comes toward adjacent 2-story single and shotgun houses, to better integrate it into the neighborhood. Again, it may not be your thing, but that's the intent. And so those decisions were made very early on. And now, unfortunately, we're literally at the stage where, not unfortunately, it just is what it is. We're at the stage where we're deciding the craftsmanship, the materials, these balcony details that have been changed, with the expectation that they're going to be pretty close to what gets built unless the developer and architect and engineers find some design conditions on site that are a problem and need to come back to us. So all of that being said, I'd encourage you to speak to the developer and architect about, and they can possibly point you in the direction. City staff architect can too, about your concerns. But please understand that this board does not want to decide how many parking spaces somebody gets or what a use is. This is really the board that decides how big it is, how it fits in with its neighborhood, and what it looks like. But I wanted you to hear all that rather than just saying thank you for your comments and gavel things down. Okay, and you can certainly talk to us too. That soliloquy having been given.
That was helpful, John.
City staff comments or recommendations?
Sure. So first, a little bit of observation. The project has changed very little from our approvals and progressed through detailing, keeping the details and materials intact. Previous board and staff comments have been satisfactorily addressed. And then some staff conditions, if approved. Number 1, and some of the renderings and elevations, the new wood fence appears to be unpainted shadow box fencing, though this would be unexpected on this sleek and contemporary project. A wood fencing detail was not found. Also, the color, which appears to be unstained and unpainted, seems foreign to the rest of the project. Please confirm design and finish for the new wood fence, acknowledging that some portions of the wood fence are on adjacent property because of its proximity and use internal to the site. Consider how the new fence could be better coordinated with the new building. 2, staff appreciates the elevations that omit the balcony shields and appreciates the consistency of the balcony railings. If noise or privacy is a concern, staff can work with the applicant on the balconies that face Spring Street if the board prefers. 3, is the material proposed for the entry plaza and vehicular entry, I'm sorry, I made it a question apparently. Is the material proposed for the entry plaza and vehicular entry consistent with other properties on the block? I'm looking for sidewalk consistency and how that relates to what's inside the property line. Other sidewalks appear to be concrete, and so we would suggest just looking for something that would be consistent. Also, being outside the property line, staff would merely suggest that while the seamlessness is attractive, how the pattern of bricks at the sidewalk and vehicle entry are laid, in addition to the lowering of the curb, might suggest to the pedestrians that it is a vehicle entry. Number 5, exterior building materials shall wrap into the interior of the vehicular entry a minimum of 35 feet or to a point which visually makes sense with specialty pavers and a ceiling. 6, staff would again caution that finding adequate tradesmen to install a metal panel system such as this has been difficult here, and that a rigorous QA/QC program for this material will be needed. And last, the details of windowsills at floor slabs on page 8904 appear to show no slope for drainage. I'm sure you have it all figured out, but I was just noting it to confirm or restudy. Have a look for that slope.
In your
Oh, yeah. Got it. Final approval with board comments and staff conditions with approval of materials and with review by staff of 4 comment drawings.
Mr. Hornoff or Mr. Roberts, there was one question it sounded like, or something to be responsive. Would you care to respond now or another Q&A?
Sure, I'm happy to.
Was number 3.
I think, yeah, the question regarding sidewalk materials.
Yes,
And also this fence detail.
I think the wood fence that we portray in the drawings and on the renderings was our attempt to
make it more residential, fit in with the Ashton side of the building rather than the modern side. But that's a thing we're happy to look at, certainly.
And sidewalk materials.
Yes,
consistent.
I agree. I think there is, as you rightly note, there's concrete sidewalk all the way down Spring Street, and we expect to do the same.
Okay, very good. Anything else from Mr. Hornoff at this time? Okay, very good. We will now move into board deliberation and a potential vote on this agenda item. What do my fellow board members have to say about this final application?
I mean, I appreciate the continued development of the project, and I appreciate staff's comments and conditions. And not to be too wonky, but items 3 and 4, are those comments exclusively regarding items in the right of way?
4 is noted as being outside the property. It is a suggestion.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
because, I mean, obviously the lowering of the curb is gonna be in the right of way, but how that, it's shown as pavers right now, so how it's laid, just, it looks very seamless and beautiful, but being pedestrian oriented. So that is just a suggestion, and 3 does relate to, if, not saying what to put in the public right away, but if it does end up being concrete, how does that affect the material that's laid in that sort of entry plaza?
I see. Yeah, because since we were going off on a jag about the purview, if it's in the right of way, that's actually beyond.
Right. Absolutely.
So these are
That's
just
not within
suggestions
our
to that.
purview.
Okay.
How that affects what's on the property, though, it might be worth considering.
Well, I agree with staff's conditions and recommendations.
Very good. Further board comments?
Thank you. In agreement and project was very interesting, building design, interesting, development of the details. You have a recommendation, comments, seems to be going in the right direction, so looking forward. Let's see it go.
Mr. Madison?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your comment. Really. So focusing on the compatibility of metals with the different products that are going on. The mock-up. What's going to be shown in the mock-up and some of the way that things tie together. It's going to be interesting. And then sports condition number 6, with all the different things that are going on and different flashing details. Doing as you do, surrounding yourself with people that are good craftsmen. There's going to be some intricate detail in there.
I'll just say this as it appears that we're coming to resolution on this project, this presentation. Number one, I think it's refined nicely. That doesn't always happen. I know that this is an affordable housing unit, but it does not feel at all valued engineered. It has a lot of dignity. I think it's a very elegant building, considering what it's being asked to do in terms of being affordable housing. And that it has become more consistent, more streamlined. I think my favorite elevation is that west elevation. It's very clean. And the changes to detail have been thoughtful. I agree with James that number one, you correctly figured out how to punch and do some fenestration on the zinc panels. I think that lightens it up, and everywhere you've erred to the side of getting more light inside the building and more glass and more fenestration. And that's been to the benefit of this building. But not to beat a dead horse, good luck assembling the team who can build it. Because I think if it's done well, I think if the paneling is, and I'm not saying that, I think if the paneling is done well, it's really outstanding. I think if it's not, it's a letdown just because it's such an essential element. But I know y'all can figure that out.
I guess hopefully we will see all that resolved in mock-up and all that.
Precisely, we are very discriminating on who we use as tradesmen and realize the level of detail and craftsmanship that will manifest itself in the sample town. And this project is entirely supervised by the architectural and ownership team. This is not a syndicated project. An absentee team. We watch things like a hawk.
Good. Further board comments, or can I entertain a motion?
I'll introduce a motion for final approval with board and staff comments with final review by staff of permit drawings.
Is there a second to Mr. White's motion? It's from Lou to Subchuck. So proper order, Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Ms. Subchuck?
And
Mr. White?
Yay in favor.
And myself, yea in favor. Thank you to the applicant. members of the public who spoke. I think you will find everyone here available to address your concerns to the extent we can, or point you in the right direction. Development teams here too, so, and who we know and are in fact locals. So I would encourage you to take advantage of, speaking with them, maybe to address some of the things you raised tonight, which this board does not have purview over. Thank you so much, and that concludes our agenda for the evening.